All right. Well, it's just about 6 o'clock, so let's start. Thank you all so much for being with us today. My name's Caitlin. I'm one of the environmental educators at VINS. So thank you all so much for joining us on our very first virtual Owl Friday for this year's Owl Festival, the eighth that we've done. And so I'd like to invite you all to our Owl Festival in person if you are able. On April 15th, we'll be celebrating all things owl. And so there's going to be games and live owls to see, lots of things to do. And so please join us on April 15th. We also have a couple of virtuals coming up. So next week, on April 7th, we have the Teton Raptor Center, who's going to be talking about their Poo Poo Project, which is a great initiative to protect owls from some of those pipes around the country and all across, different countries as well. So a really cool project to learn about. And then the next Friday is April 14th. The Owl Research Institute will be talking about their research on great gray owls. So if you haven't signed up to come to those virtuals, please sign up so you can join us for those as well. And so VINS, our mission is to motivate people to care about their environment, and we do it through education, research, and wild bird rehabilitation. So we are really, really excited today to be doing these kind of programs to teach ourselves and our community about different owls from across the country, and how we can help them. And so I'd like to thank anybody who took the time to do a donation for their viewing today. That donation will go to doing more of our work. So we really appreciate that. And so without further ado, I will introduce Bob Fox, who is from Wild at Heart, a rescue rehabilitation and release center for birds of prey in Arizona. He'll be teaching us about his work establishing habitat for burrowing owls and their project with captive rearing Cactus Ferruginous Pygmy owls. And so we're really excited to learn more about these species. So thank you, Bob, for joining us today, and I'll leave it to you.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome to everyone from Wild at Heart. And I'm going to get myself set up here for this. Share screen.
Can you get it? Sure.
Share. As soon as my tech gets me set up here. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Well, Wild at Heart's a wildlife rehab center that was incorporated back in '94. My wife and I founded this. And we started with the idea we'd just be working with owls, and barn owls were our specialty. But all of a sudden, we started getting other calls, and we got a little bit crazy. So as we've been going along, we see that we are really focused now on the rehabilitation of all birds of prey. Our primary focuses right now are on the burrowing owls, and we have a captive breeding program for the Cactus Ferruginous Pygmy owls. The Western burrowing owl, you can see these beautiful pictures here by Joel Sartore for the ARC project, are a wonderful little species. They're a diurnal crepuscular owl that range all across the West from Canada down into Mexico and beyond. They live in burrows underground. Their diet, insects, small rodents, birds. They're really more diurnal, crepuscular, but we find them out throughout the 24 hours of the day. They are somewhat communal in nature, and they really love the grasslands. That's their prime habitat. And you can see this little juvenile here having a nice mouthful of bug. Their range extends, as you can see, up in through Canada. They're pretty limited now in the plains states due to the destruction of the prairie dog colonies. Down in through here, we have some year-round and non-breeding areas along the coast down into here. Their range has been really decimated over the last number of decades due to construction due to the poisoning of prairie dog colonies, and that sort of problems. You can see here over the last 100 years, the fossorial mammal reduction has impacted them tremendously. The conversion of grassland to agriculture, and right now we're dealing with a lot of this with solar plants and wind, and just the continuing development of suitable habitat makes it very difficult for this species to find proper environments to nest in and to find good find good food. So back in the early 90s, as we were doing our rehab, all of a sudden a developer dropped off 3 fledgling burrowing owls. We didn't know where they came from. We didn't have much experience with them. And when it was time for them to release, my late wife looked at me and said, you can't just toss them out in the air and say, find a hole to live in. You have to build them something. And so, of course, my only response was, yes, dear. So we started doing the artificial burrow system. It was a very, very jury-rigged system to begin with, but it worked. We'd done some research and found that they were holding the birds for a short time at the center and then putting them under the artificial tents for a week or so. But we realized that really wasn't enough time for them to break fidelity to their old territory and to create new site fidelity at their new one. You can hear as an idea of some of the areas they live in. This is the face of a wash, in a canal that was probably 12 feet high, and they're kind of right in the middle there. They will find any hole they can to live in. This was in the middle of a street in Phoenix, Arizona, right in front of a high school. And they were living in that hole, and the little owls would pop their heads up, and if cars were going along the outside lane, they just watch it go by. A car coming down their lane, they duck down and let it pass by and pop back up. So I called my city contacts, and they said, give us an hour. They sent a road crew out, blocked the lanes, and gave me the opportunity to trap the birds and remove them. So it worked out very well for them. Nobody got hurt. And at that point, it was out of nesting season, so there was no eggs I had to worry about. Otherwise, I would have had to excavate that asphalt and go into the burrow. They have all sorts of habitat. Here you can see they're just desperate for any type of hole they can find. We'll see them. This is a concrete slab they're underneath. We see them in sidewalks, under streets, in pipes, in canals, in drains, anything they can find to live in, including odd places. Cemeteries are not necessarily the best place, but we have found them there. I got a call last year from one of the native communities, and they were actually burrowing under some of their grave sites also. So the owls were removed and everything worked out. So because we find them in such odd places, it just shows how desperate they are for that good, healthy habitat. And we want to make sure that they stay nice and healthy. So it's very important for us to make sure that we find good places for them. One of the odd behaviors that they have, we call it decoration. And here you'll see some of the June bugs, some of the little feathers and pellets and so on. They will bring material back to their nest, like feathers, dung, anything they can to decorate the exterior of their nest and even down into the burrow itself. And we believe this is due to 2 reasons. Number one, it will attract insects that they can then consume. It also helps to mask their scent from predators. Now, it's really a really driven behavior. Well, we've actually seen them as we release them from their tents. We had one fly out into a sheep flock, grab dung, and fly it right back to that burrow and start decorating it. They always don't know what they're getting. Since they have no sense of smell, they'll bring things back they think might be dung. It could be bark, it could be styrofoam. I found old socks, honeycomb, all sorts of weird items in their burrows. As you can see here, they are pressured by development. This little guy, his burrow was just, he's standing at the edge of the face of the little ridge there, and his burrow was down about 8 feet from that, and this heavy equipment was passing back and forth throughout them all day long and getting ready to actually eliminate that burrow. So we were able to get out and trap them. The birds that are around human habitation all the time are very adaptable. Like I say, we find them under streets in suburban areas, and that's one of their saving graces. The burrowing owls are loved by the community of humans around them. So when they see signs of development, my phone starts blowing up, and we get out and talk to the people involved to make sure that the owls are safe and are not being harmed, or their burrows are not being harmed. And we work in conjunction with the Arizona Game and Fish Department and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service if there is any sort of encroachment issues that are not being taken care of by the developers. We have set up this program so that it makes it really fairly simple for development to continue while we actually get out and remove the birds. It's taken a long time to establish the correct permits. In the early days, there were no requirements. There were no set procedures for doing relocations of burrowing owls. So over time, working with Fish and Wildlife Service Permits Office, we were able to actually codify the regulations and getting into a special use permit that was a requirement for each and every development that was undergoing relocation process. And that process would generally take about 60 days. And which is a long time to wait in between for something to happen. So if owls are there, construction is started, we build about 100-foot perimeter around that for safety, allowing the owls to live until that permit would come in. So I'd worked very diligently with Fish and Wildlife to try and get a programmatic permit that would allow me to go out at any time. And so we had long conversations and big meetings, and let's do a special scientific collecting permits. I filed everything. They sent it back saying, no, that really doesn't quite fit the criteria. So I sent us another form in. No, it still doesn't really work. And this is months have gone by. And the permit manager said, well, I'm going off on special assignment, so I'm not going to be here. Another person is taking over. So I started talking to her. And her response, well, we really need to have you have a standalone permit where you can go out at any time and, X number of birds a year and a 3-year permit. And I said, yes, exactly. That's what I want. We don't do that. And I go, oh, thank you. But through working with them, we were able to finally get a standalone permit that allows me at any time to go out and remove the owls at risk when necessary. It has helped streamline the process and made the development community and the owl community much happier and healthier. Now, this is how we will trap them. I use a call that's a subdominant juvenile male call, and it attracts them in. And I sit and watch and wait. And as they go close enough to that little trap, they go in and boom. And we remove them from there, then bring them back to the center. Once they have been captured, I make sure I have the male and female if at all possible, especially during nesting season. It's difficult to make sure that we have everybody out of there. So then we actually have to go in and excavate their burrows. Oops, this is going a little bit too fast. Sorry about that. And so this is actually a fairly simple one that was straightforward, but these oftentimes will veer off left, right, they'll be wise. The burrow average is about 8 to 10 feet in length, anywhere from 2 to 5 feet deep, but I have had them go over 30 feet long and 7 feet deep, which is a lot of work digging them out. Probably the worst I had was in Lake Havasu City, which is up in northwestern Arizona. And they were in a very rocky wash. And the owls were at the very base of a wash face. And there was about 10, 12 feet high. And as I started digging in, the burrow kept going down farther and farther. After about 12 hours of digging, I was in 19 feet, 7 feet down at the very end of the burrow. I couldn't feel anything else in there, but I could hear chicks. And I go, oh my goodness. And I reached the very side of the burrow, and there's a very small hole. And I peeled that away, and that's where the nesting chamber was. So that's why we don't use cameras, because they're very not very accurate. As you can see, this is kind of an S shape going around through there. But once we get in, we find the nestlings, bring them in, and they're hopefully we'll put them with their parents, and the parents then continue to raise them, and then they end up getting released. Clutch sizes are normally up to about 8, and depending on environment, anywhere from all 8 to only 1 may survive into that after fledging. They come out of the nest at about 10 days, and they're very vulnerable to predators. And their predators are everything from, raptors, ground-based mammals, foxes, badgers, snakes, etc. So they are at quite a bit of risk. That's why they produce a lot of offspring. And occasionally they get into trouble. We get into some of these man-made areas in drains and so on, and they get tangled up. This was a very sad one where this group of young burrowing owls had been tangled up in a line of some sort, of cotton line, and gotten completely tangled up. When we were able to pull them out, there was one that had already been deceased. They had been dragging around. They'd been in there for several days, but we were able to finally get everything separated, and at least these 2 managed to survive and ended up getting released. But again, it's the public that sees these situations and allows us the opportunity to go in and remove them and make sure that they are safe and secure. Once we have the birds, the original process was we would hold them here for, a minimum of 30 days, as long as 90 days, in order to break their fidelity to their home territory. This species is somewhat migratory. During the fall months, females in the first years will move out, head down south. Some go down into Mexico. The males will tend to stay and protect their territory. At the same time, we have birds from the north coming down temporarily into this habitat. So they are somewhat migratory, so we have to really establish a new habitat for them. So this is one of our very early beginnings of our tents. We started them off, ground level, put a box in for their nesting chamber, piled dirt on it, and then built this small little tent enclosure that would house them. It would hold them there for 30 days. And that helps acclimate them to that burrow. And during that time, we have volunteers that go out on a daily basis to feed and water and care for them and monitor the situation. Once that 30 days is up, that net enclosure comes down, and then we supplement feed them for another week or so, because it takes time for the male, especially, to establish his new hunting territory. And so there's a lot of pressure on him to make sure that he can actually accomplish that without any problems. So that's a big part of the process, is establishing, good habitat and allowing them to find that really good nesting, and hunting area. They eat a lot of insects, as we said, small rodents, birds the size of doves, red-winged blackbirds. So they're very voracious. Even small bunnies they will take and bring back to their burrows. Again, here's a group of volunteers putting together one of the older style tents. We're getting ready to put the owls in there. So we work with a lot of different groups, volunteer groups from high schools, from scout troops, from nature societies, in order to make sure that this habitat is done. One of the big issues we find now is there's not a lot more habitat left in our area around Maricopa County. So oftentimes these birds are being translocated anywhere from 75 to 100 miles away. And that's a lot of pressure on us to make sure these things get taken care of. As you can see, this original tenting was done with PVC pipe and a nice screening, little shade area for them. And it worked out really, really well. But it was very time consuming. All of this surface around the exterior had to be covered heavily with dirt to make sure that they weren't pulled up, so we didn't have coyotes or anything digging into that, or they couldn't dig out. And an area here where the rocks are is what we would move those, and that's where the food and water would be placed on a daily basis. So over the years, we've adapted our procedures for building the habitat. About 10, 12 years ago, a gentleman named Greg Clark came to me and asked how he could help. And being an engineer, I said, well, we need someone to help build these tents. Unfortunately, the poor guy has been working for us ever since, putting in huge amounts of work and energy to get this done. Now you can see again, this is again one of our older sites, and we're just introducing the bird into the tube that goes straight in to the burrow itself. But there's a slight bend in that so that it's a light trap and a predator trap. And over time, again, we keep evaluating and changing to make sure that we're doing the best thing that we can for them. So here's the process of starting to put together some of this. You can see the deep trench. We dig about a pit's about 4.5 feet deep, and that gives you that temperature gradient that's constant year round. The corrugated PVC comes out and curves up to the ground level, where it is then sleeved with hard PVC so that animals can't dig into that and break it up. We have had instances where dogs would, chew the pipe and so on. So we've learned how to harden that using hardware cloth and other means to make sure that they aren't torn up. Unfortunately, one of the situations we do find is that idiot people will go out and shove rocks down those tubes. So it's a constant monitoring and making sure that they are open and safe. Because once those tubes are blocked, if they block them all, they don't have a chance to get out. You'll see down here on the bottom, you can see the buckets that we use. Now, some of these are interconnected, so they have a front door and a back door. So it does give them a way to get out, if not all, if one tube is closed. And as we move forward, you can see we've changed from PVC to steel pipe. And that was also a very sturdy, well-built enclosure. And we've actually survived microbursts with these. But again, it's a lot of process, a lot of work, putting all this together, wiring it, making sure there's no sharp objects, no sharp points, nothing for them to get themselves caught into. And again, it's just a huge amount of work. We're not putting in, 1 or 2 of these enclosures on a site. We may be putting in 30 or 40 or 100 burrows on a location. And then when we do is we cap some of those and it allows for expansion of the colony. It allows us to bring other birds in to recruit native birds to this site and to help really build up that population. And so again, you can see this was the larger tents that we used to use. In the early days, we put in a whole family unit of maybe anywhere from up to 10 birds. And there would be 4 different burrow sections in here that they could use. Research with the World Owl Project and David Johnson has shown that we probably want to do more single pairs or single small families. So we've adapted that now to using these pop-ups that work out very, very well. It removes a lot of the hours putting together the frames and building those up. So it makes it a lot simpler. We can do a lot more tents in an area a lot quicker. And here's one of our new finished projects. And where the blocks are down here, those are removed, and that's where the food and the water is placed in. Now, these have been very successful and very predator proof until late last year. We actually had a coyote for the first time dig in and unfortunately get one of our owls. So it was an area that we hadn't been in before. So we had to figure out a way to predator proof this even more. So we went out and we bought, I think, 20 pounds of cayenne pepper and sprinkled that all around the base of the enclosures that we had. And after that was done, we had no more coyote problems. I don't think they liked the scent. So that really helped us to figure it out. We've also had situations where once the tents have been gone, we had a badger come in and tear up like 50 feet of our of our tunnels. So it's always a fight trying to make sure that we're keeping them safe and secure. We have put in over 8,000 artificial burrows throughout Arizona, and 3,000 burrowing owls have been relocated to these different sites. We evaluate all types of habitat, creosote flats, open desert, but we found that the irrigated farmland is really showing the best long-term success. Finding good-minded farmers and ranchers has been important, and they're a really wonderful working relationship, a great partnership. Once we can convince them that they're not the ones that are creating the problems, they're eating the problems that are created, by digging the holes, and they eat a lot of insects and so on. This process isn't come cheap, and there's no real government funding for it. So it's all done through donations. We've gotten, working with Arizona Audubon on several projects, we've gotten some grants from them. The developers do pay for their care, so that covers part of the cost, but mostly it's done by personal donations. And we could not do that without the general public's involvement. And here we've got just some nice photos of the little male relocated on his little perch, little signpost out here in the open area. And again, you can see let me go back that one. You can see the corrugated PVC surrounded by the pipe, and the foam inside helps insulate that and keep everything nice and clean. You can see the little bit of prey drop and droppings down here on the bottom. This little guy came in, his beak is kind of misaligned. He's got an eye problem on the other side, but he ended up being successfully reintroduced back into the wild. Now, this is, again, artificial burrows on the old style where we're doing it on mounds. And that was fairly effective. Just some nice pictures here of them flying. What's really fun to watch is when it's time for them to start learning how to fly, the dad will fly up and call to the young and get them to pop up and fly up. And so it's really an enjoyable part of the process. You can see how long their wings are. Their flight is fairly distinctive. They will fly low and dip up and down as they fly. And what's amazing is there was one burrowing owl that was captured in Tucson and banded, released, and 10 days later was found in Canada. So he made a huge long distance flight in a very, very short time. The research says, oh, burrowing owls aren't going to be around Cactus. Well, they don't read the research. They say they won't find them in trees or under trees. We find burrows under trees and owls perched in them quite frequently. The reason they don't want to be around Cactus is that hides their predators. Great horned owls nest in these saguaros, hawks nest in these saguaros. So as again, we're talking about, they're really at risk from predators. And there are two instances in the past that I have gotten great horned owls in that had been electrocuted, and they had burrowing owls in their talons. A really bad day for both birds. Now, generally, they will have a clutch of up to 8 eggs. This little girl right now, she just laid her 9th. So I guess she can't count. We have some beautiful little photos here of these little guys. We'll go back into that. So the burrowing owl is doing okay. Their numbers are still in decline because of habitat loss and all of the issues that we've mentioned, but we're hopeful that we're seeing some progress in stemming that. We don't have the funding to do a lot of follow-up research, because that takes a lot of time and energy. But we do have sites that have had continuous populations in our artificial burrow system for over 15 years. And they're constantly producing offspring and thriving and doing quite well. So they oftentimes, some will migrate down south and we don't know what happens to them down there. Some may never return. Some migrate from the north and head back north in the spring. Other times they just stay on site. So it's a very interesting, convoluted migratory pattern that these guys will go through. And they're a lot of fun to watch. So the wonderful part about the Burrowing Owl Relocation Project is it's gotten a lot of community involvement. A lot of people are invested and intrigued by this species. And it has been a very successful program to date. So hopefully we'll continue to be able to do this and help protect this little species from being extirpated here. There used to be millions of them in the plain states. But back in the 50s, a lot of the prairie dog colonies were poisoned to remove the prairie dogs so that cattle wouldn't step in the prairie dog hole. By eliminating the prairie dogs, we eliminated the burrowing owls. They don't dig their own burrow. They will take over existing burrows and cohabit with some of the existing animals in there. But they can move a lot of dirt if the soil is soft. But once the burrowing owls left and the prairie dogs were gone, those tunnels all kind of filled up and wells in the area started going dry. Because what happened was all those tunnels that were allowing rain to come in and percolate down and recharge the groundwater were now clogged and the water was running off and not allowing it to recharge. So again, an inadvertent consequence of our human actions. So again, we move on to another species. This is the Cactus Ferruginous Pygmy owl. They are a small little owl that is at great danger here in Arizona. They were on the threatened list back in the 90s through the 2000s. They're small. You can see, those of you who are familiar with the northern saw-whets, their size. This is a northern pygmy owl, same size as the Cactus ferruginous, a little bit different coloration. But just want to give you an idea of their size. And again, they nest in saguaro cavities. They're, eat small rodents, lizards, small birds, almost exclusively birds in the wintertime, and they are ferocious little birds. I have seen them put grown men on their knees when they will stick their talons in and bite. But they have this wonderful ability to always find the crease of a joint or the quick of the nail, and their beaks and talons are extremely sharp and can be very, very painful. They are slightly dimorphic. You can see the difference between the barring in the tail between the male and the female. The male is much more contrasted than in the female. Their habitat loss is due to urbanization and invasive species of plants like buffalo grass. Now, get a range map here. It shows these are kind of the estimated numbers right now. So Arizona, we're really relegated to a very small area of this species. Now, there is some discussion on whether or not this is a subspecies or a separate species from those in Mexico and in Texas. It's been a flashpoint for a number of years as to whether or not they are recognized as a subspecies. And in the late 1800s to the 1900s, we had them all the way up here into the Maricopa County in Phoenix area. But as we started to develop and the freeways were being built, roadways were being built, we interrupted the contiguous saguaro forest. And they are a sedentary species, so they're not really moving much into other territories. So we have shrunk their habitat way down to this small area down here in southwestern, south central Arizona. And again, it gives you a really good idea here of their range. The pink area is from 1872 to 1970. And from 70 to 90, it had shrunk quite a bit, and now we're way down into this small area here. They were listed in '97, and there was a lot of talk about how we can help protect this species. And while they were listed, we had a number of conversations with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Arizona Game and Fish Department, landholders in other areas. How can we help safeguard this species? And our goal was always to start a captive breeding program. That would be it seemed to be the logical thing. But because they were listed, we were not allowed to do anything in a positive way for this species. It would just let them be and not disturb their habitat. So once they were delisted in 2006, Fish and Wildlife Service and Arizona Game and Fish went out and captured 10 birds that were brought to us to start a captive breeding program. And again, we worked with some of the researchers, Glenn Proudfoot, who's probably the most notable gentleman. And we started developing our protocols for breeding. And it was a very interesting process, to say the least. Here we have, some nice fledglings and some adults out of our first hatching. We had to build aviaries specifically for them. We wanted to make sure that the males and females could come together easily. And one of the problems we had was that the males and females, if the female didn't like the male and he introduced himself to her and she says, no, thank you, she didn't just politely say that, she would more than likely kill and eat him. So that was not a really good way to start our breeding program. So we set up these aviaries with nest boxes and our little nesting chambers inside of them, and it worked out, fairly well. Now here we've got some wonderful little video. I'll just let this play of some of our little owls. Now you'll notice these black spots on the backs of their head. These are false eyes. And they are very, very capable of looking like real eyes. Now you'll see this is both the male and the female in here with their little egg. And if we watch up into the corner here shortly, you'll see there's the nestling. Dad's taking care of it, cleaning it up. Mom's trying to get the other one out of the egg. And watching their behavior is always interesting because when we first started, we were monitoring this. They'd lay the egg, but they'd just be out of the nest. And a day or so later, another egg would be laid and they'd be out of the nest. And we're going, she's not sitting on them. They're just not going to survive. And a third egg would be laid, and that's when they would start laying. So they don't start incubating until their third egg is laid. And you can see Dad's very actively trying to chase a fly around while Mom is still cleaning the baby. Watching this video is a great way for us to really monitor and see what the behavior is and to make sure that the young are thriving and doing well. But again, you can see that those magnificent, false eyes and how well they work. And we are again, another little bit of nesting behavior here that listen to their call. And obviously the male is a big partner in caring for the young, bringing food in and, grooming and cleaning and feeding. It's been a very, very successful, operation. The problem is after a few years in captivity, their breeding seems to decrease. And so we have been working with other partners to get more fresh stock. About 5 years ago, the Phoenix Zoo came to us and with the request that they start actually captive breeding also. So we helped them sign up, set up their facility, and they've also been very successful. Of course, they have a little bit more funding than we do and more research, more resources. Again, this is inside a nesting chamber. It's a fake saguaro boot. And here comes mom in with food for the young. And I must admit, they are a goofy looking species when they're small. There's a lot of activity. This actually was video that was used on a National Geographic show called The Wild West. So these youngsters are just watching out what's going on. And once they start to get a little bit more active, they hop up out of the nest and start to fly around with mom and dad. But she's a very busy mom, making sure that everything is cleaned and everything is fed. So again, here's our adult and the young ones. They have their eye colors a little bit lighter when they're young. That darkens as they age. Three little, fairly newly hatched youngsters there. They're just about ready to fledge out. The juvenile phase, again, you can see the light eye color. And we think that we're missing some micronutrients in captivity. The Phoenix Zoo has also recorded that their offspring are coming out with much lighter colored eyes than the adults. And so that'd be a great study to do to see what kind of micronutrients that are missing from their diet. Even though we try and provide them as high quality as possible, there could be something that we're missing. And we go back into the adult phase. Yeah, again, you can see how tiny these guys are on the hand compared to that. This is a flyway. Now, this is how we figured out how to introduce males to females. There are 6 enclosures here. The 3 on the right-hand side open to one another. There are doors in between. But up top here in this flyway, there is a trap door that we put a male in one aviary, a female in the other, so that they can see each other. And after they've been acquainted for a bit through the mesh, we'll open up these trap doors. It allows the male to come in and visit the female. And if she doesn't like him, it gives him a chance to get out of Dodge. Once he's out of her enclosure, she doesn't chase him. So it makes it very simple for him. He has an escape route. And guys, we all know what that means. We all need an escape route sometimes, but at least she doesn't carry a frying pan. So this was a design that we worked long and hard to try and figure out, and it's worked out really, really well. And here you can see, some of the activity that goes on through there. The owl entering into the flyway, and owls in the flyway going back and forth. And it also gives them a good area to fly around in and make sure that they have enough space, and they can also visit others in the enclosures. They're not an eared owl, they're a round-headed owl, but they also can go into stick form, as we call it, for camouflage. And that helps break up their silhouette a little bit, and it makes them look really tough and ferocious. We were the first facility to produce young in the Cactus Ferruginous Pygmy owls. And the first one to really determine that need for mate selection for the protection of the males and the females. It's been a very rewarding process, very difficult. We haven't produced a huge number of owls yet, but we have gotten some back out into the wild. And that is the main goal and the focus of this whole process. So we started in one of the issues that we have had is that releasing them, even though they were unlisted some of the landholders didn't want them released because, well, what if they flew into my land and they got listed again? I wouldn't be able to build and any of this. So we had to hold them for quite some time. But we were finally able to get some back out into the wild. And the issue now is if they are relisted, we're going to be back in the same situation. But there are programs that will allow us to hold landholders not responsible, but that takes a year to a year and a half to get established. So we're hopeful that we can continue to breed and release. Right now, we're in the process of trying to convince one of the native communities to allow us to release on their property, because they do have Cactus, Ferruginous, Pygmy owls that live in their areas. We just don't know how many, because they do not want Fish and Wildlife and Game and Fish on their reservation to manage or to know about their wildlife. So, but we have a good working relationship with them, and we're hopeful that by the time they get relisted and we have to do anything, we'll be able to have a good area for release. We do some monitoring with them. We do where we can. We put transmitters on, RF transmitters, and have volunteers go out and monitor their locations. All the birds, of course, are banded, and we work with Game and Fish, Fish and Wildlife, Phoenix Zoo, USGS, and a lot of private homeowners. Again, it's the general public that really is important to conservation, because they're our real resources. They're the ones that can really help us out and help the wildlife out once they're aware of their importance. And here we are, we're banding the little owls. We put in a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service band and a colored ID band so that it's easier to spot them in the wild. It's hard to read the Fish and Wildlife bands, but the colored band is a lot easier to identify and locate in the wild. When they're released, we put them into a hack site, a hack box like this, where they're kept for several days and they're fed and watered while they're in there. And you can see in 2012, we released 16 released near Tucson, 5 in Ironwood National Forest, again, 2 and 6. So we've had a total of 30 released back into the wild. And we know that they have survived through the length of the transmitters, which only last about 6 weeks. Because this is such a small bird, you can't put a large transmitter on them. Any excess weight will diminish their ability to survive and to hunt. And so these hack sites are set up for 4 owls or 2 pairs. And again, they're held in there for about a week before they get back out into the wild. And so again, we can see them putting back in their little hack sites. This is how they hang out. They have their little nest box, so they can hear, they can get an idea of what their territory is, and then they get released. You can see here this long wire down here is the antenna for the radio transmitter that's attached. And like I say, after about 6 weeks, that battery is no longer viable. And they can chew these off, and they'll take them off. Now we've got the door open here, ready for this little guy to get released. There he is up in the tree. So this process is ongoing. It's difficult to go through all of this. The breeding right now, we have our pairs that are set. We have 1 pair with 4 eggs, a new pair that has just laid their first today. And so in about 30 days, hopefully we'll have some fledglings that will be able to be released back into the wild eventually later this year. It's a slow process, but it's time consuming. It is somewhat expensive, but the idea of actually being able to see these back in the wild is so exciting and so rewarding. It makes all of the effort worthwhile. So they brought in 2 owls to us this year for fresh ones, or actually in 2022. And we find that getting them out of the wild is that first 24 hours out of the nest cavity that they're much easier to capture and bring in. And that's what we're trying to do when we're trying to capture new ones, to get fresh blood into the breeding program. As you can see, they're like to, you know, perch on the trees, waiting for something tasty to walk by. But this is their natural habitat, up in those big saguaro cactus and these wonderful little cavities. The cavities are done by gila woodpeckers, cactus wrens. They chip out that hole looking for insects, and then the cactus exudes a material that actually hardens inside that and seals everything off to create a wonderful little cavity that they can get into. Plus, the fact is that the saguaro is so full of water that the temperature gradient, when it drops quickly in the exterior, the interior gradually cools down and gradually warms up during the day. And that's one of the issues that we've been working with in our artificial nest boxes in the aviaries, is trying to come up with the proper mix of temperatures so it doesn't affect the eggs or the young. And so that's always been an issue, trying to make sure we have the correct method of doing that. Again, this is the male up there. You can see how beautifully contrasted those tail feathers are. Little fledglings that that was one of the captures that's now in our breeding program. And one of our volunteers down in the southwestern Arizona, trying to help capture these and monitor them later on in the year. So those are the wonderful things from Wild at Heart, from our little birds, and just some great photos. And I think we've got time now for some questions. Hopefully you have some for us. If you're not familiar with the National Geographic Photo Ark and Joel Sartori's work, please get involved, see that stuff. He has done amazing work. He's been here a number of times and shot a number of our birds for the Ark, but it's a wonderful project. Juveniles, male, you can see the shorter tail, it's still growing in. Okay. See, where's my audio? Do we have any questions?
Hi there.
Hi.
Caitlin's having some trouble.
Oh, okay, good. I thought it was
herself,
me.
But no, you're fine. That was a really, really lovely presentation there, Bob. Thank you so much. And
no, you're welcome.
You got a lot of love in the chat. We do have a couple of questions for you. So and yeah, you're welcome to leave up that slide so people can know how to get in touch with you and help support your work. But yeah, we got a few questions as, hang on. I know how to unmute Caitlin. I have the authority. Yes, I think like even I have some questions as well. So we'll get right to it. Let me find Caitlin here.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks.
Perfect. That's all my fault. That's all my fault. All right. Back at you, Caitlin.
Yeah, I'm happy Anna took the lead there, but thank you so much, Bob. That was really, really fascinating. I see some of the links here for you, but what is, what would you say is a way that people can help you out?
Just go to our website, donate. That's a great way. We all of our organizations need funding. If you're in the area, volunteering is a wonderful thing. And our organization is set up so that when people are even on vacation, if they have a day or two and they want to do some volunteer work, we really enjoy that because it helps spread the message. when my wife and I first started, one of the first things we wanted to do was make sure that children would be allowed to volunteer. So we have had young people as young as 10 with their adult parents, supervising, come out and volunteer and become a part of this. And it has created a wonderful environment for youth to get involved. And we've seen some wonderful progress over the years. We've had kids come in, they're now biologists, they're now veterinarians, they're all, so it's a great thing. And the experience of a parent and a child working together for conservation, for wildlife, creates a lifelong bond that is unlike any other that you'll see. So we encourage people to contact us if they're in and they can spend a little time, volunteering, or they just want to come and see the facility. But primarily right now it's donations, and there's ways you can do that online. You can go through PayPal or several other ways of donating.
Great. All right, so let's jump into some of those questions. So Mary asks, you had very clear photos about how big the Ferruginous Pygmy owl was. How big are the burrowing owls?
They're about 9 inches tall, and weight-wise, they average between, a female is below 150 grams, males above 150 grams, allegedly. We've had females down to about 112. We just had one come in last year that was, I think, 205.
Wow.
So, but she's lost a little bit of weight since then. And it's interesting is that if you have a male and a female, they're going to be close to the same size. So a larger female is going to look for a larger male. A smaller female is going to look for a smaller male. We can also tell primarily by their legs, looking at their metatarsus. The males is longer and thinner, and the females are a little shorter and thicker.
All right, thank you. So Zooey asks, do burrowing owls actually dig burrows when unable to find burrows?
Mostly they will find burrows. That's why we find them in all these odd areas, especially here in Arizona. The ground is so hard. It's almost impossible for them to get all the way through that. Other habitats like the Florida subspecies, they can dig their own. But again, they're really looking for those holes that are dug by the fossorial mammals.
Right. Cindy asks, the artificial burrows, the piping, the tube kind of aimed a little high or aimed upwards. Do you worry about water flowing in?
No, that's also it really works better, because if it's down low and we get a lot of wash water coming through there, that creates a problem. So it goes down and it curves and it goes back up. So there's a way for that to diminish. Plus the corrugated pipe has slits in it, so it drains out and the water drains out.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the wild, I mean, because their burrows are flush, I mean, there have been instances where whole populations have drowned in nesting season during heavy rains, especially up in Canada. I've noticed that was a problem up there.
On a related, Barbara asks, how do you regulate the temperatures in the tunnel houses you built?
Well, again, we don't regulate them. That's natural. That 4.5 foot depth creates a fairly constant temperature level.
Okay.
And they were adapted. I mean, we'll see burrowing owls sitting out on a perch in the middle of July afternoon, where it's 115 degrees outside. It doesn't seem to bother them. And that's another way we can tell males from females at a distance. The males tend to have a much more golden colored head. It's like a sunburn, sun bleached blonde, and the females tend to be a little bit darker.
Karen asks, are there wild individuals, or not wild individuals, but ones that weren't originally from the artificial burrows? Do they kind of join into the community of the artificial burrows?
Oh, yes, indeed. That's one of our goals, is to recruit new birds in. So over time, we will see that we have some of our banded birds, and then we have some that are unbanded. So we are bringing others into that artificial habitat. And that's one of our main goals, is to create that colony area for them.
John asks, are the burrowing owls fluffy?
They're like other birds. They can fluff themselves up and make themselves puff up and look big, but they're sleek.
I noticed that in the tents that you had mentioned the cinder blocks that you
Yes,
kind of like move the cinder blocks to go in or to put food in.
yes.
We at Vins, we work a lot with little birds, and sometimes they're escape artists. Do you worry about like ones that might sneak out, or are they pretty skittish that they hang out kind of away from you when you kind of go in?
We worry. And so it's part of the training of the volunteers to make sure that the birds are not hiding. I mean, they can, but we're very cautious about that. Just as a note, we've not had, in all the birds we've done, I think maybe one or two have returned to their original site. And one instance was before we had all of our catch pens built here at the center, a volunteer went in and an owl had shot right out of the door. It'd only been in here for about a week. And about 10 days later, I got a call from the developer saying, hey, there's an owl back at this burrow. And so I drove down, and it's about 45 miles across all freeways. And there he was in a hole about half the size of his original burrow that he was just trying to cram himself into. And we knew it was the same one because we have ID bands and all the birds here at the center. So we know it was him. But other than that, because of the holding them and acclimating to the new burrows, we break that site fidelity, and that really establishes them in their new territory.
You had mentioned as well using the subdominant male calls to attract the owls to the trap. Can you tell a little bit more about why that is effective?
It's effective because the adult males and females will hear this juvenile calling saying, what the hell are you doing here? Or they'll want to come in and see who this intruder is. And I love burrowing owls, but they're going to be the death of me. You saw the one that was being trapped. Well, that was a short clip. He was probably around that trap for an hour and a half before finally going into that. They will dance around the back of it. They'll fly up to it, then fly back away from it and back and forth. When I first started, before I had the remote trap that you saw, I was using a manual, and I had a pair on a fairly large site. I got the female immediately in the burrow. We used a tube trap. She came out, got her easily. The male would stand on a perch, and there's a cage with live mice in it, and he'd sit there and he'd look at the mice. He'd fly back, and he'd drop a dead mouse by mine, and his were always a little bit bigger than mine. He did this for 3 weeks, every night, until finally, I guess he got tired of hunting and went down, and I ended up trapping it. So it can be 10 minutes, it can be 2 days or 3 days. So it's a real long process. And using the remote trap, it works out very well because I'm always on site monitoring them. But my days can be anywhere from 8 to 15 hours in a site to get 2 or 4 owls.
Amazing dedication. Wow. Barbara asks, for the Ferruginous Pygmy owl breeding program, once they are introduced and the female has accepted him, do they mate for life?
They are monogamous, but they will take another mate if one passes.
All right. Of the ones that were the Ferruginous Pygmy owls, the ones that were released, have you seen them nest and breed successfully now that they're out in the wild? Have you been able to monitor them on that front?
Again, monitoring is only until the radio transmitters are gone. They're so elusive that it's difficult to tell. So we're hopeful that has been the case, but we have no definite documentation of that.
Zooey asks, where exactly do you attach the transmitter? Is it like a backpack? Is it a leg transmitter?
It's a backpack, a very, very small backpack.
Yeah. Abby asks, how large is the burrowing owl population?
It's hard to determine. And that's again, depending on where you're at. Here in Arizona, the numbers, all we can say is the numbers have diminished rapidly over the years because of habitat loss. There are sites that I have been to that used to be fairly populous, and all of a sudden they're gone. And so sometimes we just don't know what is causing that. I mean, there was a site that had probably 12 pair on it. It hadn't been disturbed. I came back the next year and all the owls were gone. So we don't really know exactly what the numbers are, but we do know that they are in decline. So they are a species of concern in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service protocols.
I have one last question from the chat, but we'll leave it open for a second too. Victoria asks, is it true that any species of owl can switch one talon from the top to the back? So they're familiar with some of the owls. Is there a specific talon that they use to kind of switch? I imagine that's the fact that they can like go from like 2 to 2 and then 3 to 2, 3 to 1.
Yes,
sorry.
that's correct. Yeah.
Is that true for both of these species?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Well, I'll give it a couple moments. If anybody has any other questions they want to ask, this is the time. Great. Well, thank you so much, Bob. A reminder that Bob will be at Owl Festival on April 15th. He'll be talking about his fostering program at his rehab department. So more chances to learn the amazing work that Wild at Heart does. And so join us on April 15th for all the cool things that are happening and the virtuals that are happening in the next 2 weeks as well. Thank you so much, Bob.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure meeting you virtually, and thank all the viewers for participating. Hopefully we'll see some of you in Vermont in a couple of weeks. All right.
Well, we've got a lot of thank yous from the chat and lots of great questions. So we'll leave you on that. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.